Hi everyone, it's day 22 of the Vendée Globe, and joining me today is Marcus Hutchinson. And Marcus is the team manager for Thomas Ruyant's campaign LinkedOut. But before we bring Marcus in, we've just had a video from Alex Thomson in the last few hours. A very heartfelt message from him to all his supporters. Let's just have a look at that.
Hello everybody. Well, it's taken me a few days to digest what's happened, gather my thoughts before I felt able to speak to you. I'm normally a very positive person, but if I'm honest right now, I feel pretty broken. You know, for the best part of 20 years, this race has been my goal. You know, we've come so close before, and this time I really thought it was possible. I have the boat of my dreams. We've put together a campaign I'm extremely proud of, and despite the setbacks of the last week, I still thought it was possible to win, or at the very least finish. I've given my life to this sport, and it's a very difficult pill to swallow. So many people have supported me along the way, and I can tell you, picking up the telephone to deliver the news, well, it's just heartbreaking. This sport, this race is just so tough. Things could change so quickly, but that's the beauty of it, and it's so challenging, and that's why I've given a large part of my life to it. The messages of support from the fans have been incredible. I really don't feel worthy, but also from the other skippers and the teams, your words have really touched me. I sincerely hope you all make it safely to the finish. But for now, I need to concentrate on taking this beautiful boat home, getting out of Cape Town safely, and there I'll officially retire from the race. And the last thing I need to say is to say thank you to everybody who supported me. To my team, thank you for your dedication and your hard work. I know you couldn't have done more. But thank you also to our partners. You've worked tirelessly with us, and you've shown such dedication, such loyalty, and I can't thank you enough. I couldn't quite make history this time round, but I can tell you I gave it everything I got.
Marcus, not really difficult to comment on that, but as a team manager, you probably brace yourself for these moments. What do you think of that video from Alex?
Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, wherever you are. Alex is a commensurate skipper in many ways, in that not only is he able to do it, but he's able to share the emotion and share the message about why he's doing it and what it's all about. And for that, we all have huge respect for him. Without the efforts of Alex and Hugo Boss over the last 20 years, there's no question that our section of this sport would not be in the place it is. They've done so much to publicize this and to share what an amazing sport it is. He's put us all to shame on that, and obviously all of our hearts go out to him and his team and his partners for what's going on. But can't really thank them enough for what they've done over the last 20 years, and I hope over the next few years, because I really hope this isn't the end of Alex and Hugo Boss. It is definitely the worst nightmare for any skipper to have to make those calls. Regrettably, most of us have passed through that place at different levels. I would say that there's some teams that perhaps don't have quite the profile that Hugo Boss has, and so perhaps it's not as big a deal. But Hugo Boss, by virtue of being there, Alex's team, by virtue of having been there for such a long time and having been such a great performer, although they have had their ups and downs in the past, they've learned along their way and they've done some amazing things. Clearly the last two races he had a third, he had a second, and regrettably the target was on his back. He could only do better, and that was to win the thing. And clearly his team and his sponsors put absolutely everything into it with an amazing boat and an amazing campaign. And and then this happens. You know, it's a cruel sport. It's a cruel world. It's a mechanical sport. Personally, not a major believer in luck or fate or any of these things. You know, but clearly there is plenty of that involved here. You know, our hearts all went out to everybody, perhaps disproportionately to Alex, because he's done so much for the sport and done so much for this section, and all of the effort of all of that team over all of those many years. But you know, this is what makes the stories great, and this is what makes the myth of this race so large and so tangible to so many people, and just keeps drawing and attracting more and more people to do it. And you know, very few people get to do it, and once in their life, very few people. I mean, Alex is amongst a very rarefied group of very few that have done it this many times. I think only he and LeCam they're on their fifth now this time. Hats off to them, and you know, hearts go out to them. But
yeah, very, very difficult. Which brings me, I guess, into your role as a team manager. 4 years ago, you were managing Paul Meilhart, and in fact, you know, you had to deal with a retirement in the race. What?
I had two boats in the last race.
Two boats.
Retired,
Okay.
So, yeah.
You know, obviously Alex, you know, is really is the front face of this team, very, very much so, as the skippers are. As a manager, you know, what happens next? You get the call, you know, perhaps you're going to retire. Well, what happens?
You know, presumably, you know, before that call, before that final call that I've got to put out, there's a call that comes usually at 3 o'clock in the morning to say, Houston, I've got a problem. I had that call myself a few days ago when Tomo called about his foil, and it was dark and he didn't really know, and all the rest of it. What happens is that, you know, you're clearly in a crisis management program, and so, you know, you rally together your crisis management group, and you make the assessments as to what it is with the information that you have from the boat. Every scenario is completely different from the next, as you well know, and you try and make the assessment as to what the situation is, and what the best course of action is right now, and what the best course of action is over the coming hours. And then clearly, because we're in a sport that is highly mediatized, and there's a tracker, everybody's watching this all around the world. There's no sleep time, there's no downtime. And one of the first things you have to do is to make an assessment as to how long until the next sked is published, and everybody sees, oh, look, he's going slow or something like that. But you know, that being neither here nor there really in the big scheme of things. If you have contact with your skipper, then clearly, you know, and there's no immediate danger to the safety of the skipper or the boat, then obviously you tackle it very differently to if you don't have contact with him, or you have contact with him and he's either wounded, which I had a case of that as well 6 years ago, which was really probably the worst situation I had, where the skipper was completely incapacitated and we had to get him off, or a situation like in the last Vendée Globe, where I had one boat had a dismasting and the other boat had a keel ram failure. Neither of them were in imminent danger, but there was definitely a complex situation to get their boats back to shore.
Yep.
But anyway, to answer your question, you know, clearly you meet with your core group, make the initial technical assessments, and then work out what the statements to be made are, the holding statements, and then the ongoing statements, and keep people informed, not just your core group, but the team, the family, the sponsors, and clearly the media through the organization and your own press group, and then it filters down from that, and you keep people informed regularly as the things it develops. And every case, as I said, is completely different. Sometimes you can recover the situation and keep going, which fortunately is our case at the moment with LinkedOut. We've lost half a foil, but everything else with the boat is perfectly fine. So he's a little bit handicapped on starboard tack for the next little while, but everything else is fine. And you know, he's very much in the game and wants to continue competing as hard as he can. Mm-hmm. But when it's a case where somebody's got to retire from the race and they're a long way from home, well, clearly 24 hours after the decision to retire has happened, you still have another 1,500 miles of sailing to do before you get to a port, and you're on your own, and you're kind of questioning life, and why am I here, and what was that all about, and oh my God. And then we just saw the result of that, which was a really hard call. When he'd made the hard calls to his partners and what have you, but that was explaining the situation to his media, and hats off, fantastic, very emotional, and handled it well. And what I liked about it was that it was relatively succinct and short and to the point.
Yeah.
Everybody understands. You don't need to pass too much time doing it.
No. So, I mean, leadership is a key part of the role that you play. You've already talked about quite a number of stakeholders that you have to deal with in these situations. But I guess your primary focus is to the skipper. Am I right?
Well, yeah, to the skipper and to the team. Clearly, when we're a team, for sure. It used to be just about one person, but the reality is these teams are, our team is 12 people full time, and so it's a little company we're running here, and everybody's obviously all here for one reason, which is to make sure that the skipper starts in the best possible condition with the best possible boat and is able to continue on to the end to fulfill his objectives. But at the same time, because it's a business, you have to be thinking about the future. You have to be managing the current set of investors and current set of partners, and with an eye going forward. So our jobs are never 2 days the same. Clearly, we have a before the start period, and we have a during the race period, competition period and a out of competition period. And during a competition period, which is now, we're dealing with a day-to-day situation. The priority obviously is our partners and making sure that we exploit the situation in the best possible use of the term exploitation with media, and making sure all of our partners, because it's a very exciting time, and there's updates every few hours, there's lives, there's what have you, there's a huge amount of media, press and what have you, and we have a lot of partners from different teams that are all talking to their friends about it, and it's all the buzz. And so you want to make sure that you're keeping people informed as to what your saga is and what's going on, and keep them going, and just keep the thing in the interest by sharing as much as you can. And so personally right now, I mean, I do it twice a day. What we're doing now, I do this sort of thing twice a day with different partners, and not every day we have Tom on the phone, but I'd say we probably have him on a video link like this 3 times a week with different groups, and we rotate it over the period, and then obviously the organisation does something similar with all of the others. So we're very much about keeping our partners and the media and everybody involved, I think is the word, involved in this race whilst it's going on.
I'm interested in sort of how you balance your time really between the sporting aspects and perhaps some of the commercial aspects. Where does Marcus sit in the mix?
Well, my background, I was a naval architect, designer and sailor in a different life back in the 80s, and then I turned to more media and communications and event management in the 90s and 2000s, but I never lost the taste for sailing, and came to short-handed sailing probably only in the mid-90s really, and really understood. I'd always done offshore sailing, but never short-handed. And so I'm a bit of a jack of all trades and a master of none. I understand all of the parts. I understand the technical side. I understand the sports and sailing side. I understand the communication side, and I understand the commercial side. And I suppose also because I'm getting on in years now, I also have a little bit of gravitas and are able to talk to the people who are involved in this, certainly commercial partners and media and what have you, with a certain amount of experience and I don't want to say weight to what I say, but definitely able to explain and to help people. The French have a great term for it, which is accompagner, to accompany them in a great adventure like this. And so really my job is not to get too deeply into any one particular thing, because that would be a waste of my personal skill set. But every team is different, and some people are much more interested in the technical side or much more interested in the commercial. I kind of pan across all of them, and I'm obviously involved when we're making decisions about what type of foils to put in, or who's going to build them, or what sails we're going to have, or when we're going to renew this, or who the co-skipper is going to be. But I'm also there doing the presentations with the sponsors, and I do my fair share of media interviews, and also have to deal with human resources elements and logistical things, and certainly a huge amount of time spent on the budget, because that's also a pretty scary thing. So that's my day-to-day outside of competition. Then during competition, you add that extra element.
And then one final question just on Thomas himself. I mean, he doesn't strike me as a guy who probably during the race needs a huge amount of support. You know, he's very, very self-sufficient, as so many of these sailors are. Do you speak to him obviously on a daily basis? Is he someone that needs needs that support?
No, I don't speak to him on a daily basis. We have obviously now we have WhatsApp groups, and so we exchange all those groups, and we can see what's going on, and we share various bits and pieces with him, and he makes questions and what have you. But we keep it to a minimum. There are people. How shall I put this? Better placed than me to have ongoing daily conversations with, or not even daily conversations, but for example, the guy who writes our press releases and our web stuff, he has every other day conversation with him. He's probably the person who speaks to him the most because he writes it all up and does an amazing job. And then we have our technical director, Laurent Borges, who speaks to him a lot about, when we've got to know about whether this is holding up or that's holding up or how to fix this or whatever it is.
Yep.
My own time with him is more to deal with the helping exactly put myself in his situation as a sailor and help or ask the right questions, animate the conversation such that the people who are listening are getting stuff that's interesting and maybe interesting at their level and their general understanding of what this is all about. In terms of, mental coaches and being able to talk to him, every skipper is different, and Tomo's not that kind of guy. He doesn't really need that sort of thing for sure. You can tell when he's not in a good space and what have you, and notes of encouragement and what have you come in and going. And the midday today, I had a good chat with him, but with 500 people behind me listening on a Zoom or webinar. But I made a note to him afterwards on WhatsApp to thank him profusely for the time he had. He was very chatty today, which he hasn't been for a while. And I reminded him of that, and I said, what you've just done is amazing, and the value of their and your time and your general attitude to what you've just done is seriously valuable. And so just little words of encouragement like that, because there's time for all of that later now for sure. If he's in a really bad space, then we work out who the best person to talk to him about or what right messages to give across to him. But the guy's he's pretty level-shouldered, level-headed guy, and he's all over it. He really is. I mean, I think that's the thing about someone like Tomo, who hasn't had this project handed to him on a plate by any stretch of the imagination. He built this himself. He found the people to help or to help him put the project together, to build it without having any partners. He hired one or two people around him at the get-go. I was fortunate enough to be one of them, but I've rarely seen a guy that motivated to make it happen. And I know that when the chips are down and when he's really bad, he's the Vendée Globe's made for people like him.
Yeah, very much so. So we have a quick look at the tracker and
Sure.
And the weather forecast.
Yeah.
This is the current situation, weather as we can see it. What are your thoughts in that sort of both with Charlie and the positioning of the group where Thomas is and so on? How do you think they're going to get on in the next few days?
Statistically, when you're preparing a new design for the Vendée Globe, you model what you expect the weather to be based on statistics, i.e. what's happened in the past, not just in Vendée Globe but other races. And for the Vendée Globe, it's in three parts, as you well know. I'm not telling you that you already know, Conrad, but the first part, the descent of the Atlantic, is about pure speed and getting to the first depression ahead of the leaders such that you can slip away and build a big lead and maintain that until you get to Cape Horn. And then at Cape Horn, you look around you and work out whether you're being threatened or not, and then sail gently up the Atlantic, keeping the boat and the guy in one piece. Now, we've just ended the transition of that first part into the second part, which they're now 2 or 3 days ago moved into the Southern Ocean. But if we look back at the Atlantic north and south, we had probably 2 days of trades in the North Atlantic and 3 in the South Atlantic, when on both occasions they should have probably had closer to 4 to 6 days in each. And the foiling boats were designed for opening up the lead in the relatively straightforward conditions in the trades, both north and south of the equator. they didn't get that, and as a result, Charlie, who is the guy today who's made the least mistakes or had the least problems, represents a lead of only 200 miles over the first non-foiling boat, 300 miles over the first non-foiling boat, and shall I say the second division of boats. And that's probably the most significant thing here, because when we get into the south, well, the foiling boats, the new foiling boats like Thomson and like Charlie, and to a certain extent the big foils on the boats like PRB and Samantha Davies' boat and what have you, they're a handful. They're a handful in these big confused seas, and we didn't really know. We're only learning now quite how these boats are going to behave in those conditions, because it's a very different regime. And so having talked to Thomas at midday, he's only got one foil or half a foil on one side, and it's the bad side for a moment. The boats do not behave very well without the foil if the hull is designed for foil in a big cross sea and all the rest of it. So he's learning about which he's got two boats on his hands depending on what tack he's on. So I think Charlie is probably the best reference right now. Obviously, he's in the lead as to what the right thing to do is. He's got to be careful not to get too close to the mess of the washing machine of the Aguilar's Current and the big horrible sea state off the bottom of South Africa. So I see he's jibed, and he's heading back towards the south to the ice zone. The next group back, personally, I'm really interested to see Louis Burton doing so well and sailing a very interesting, and he's asserting himself and making interesting decisions on his own without being influenced by others. The group in the middle, with Thomas and PRB and Jean Le Cam, they are they're probably the lowest risk route right now, and they're going to make it across the front of that high, and I think they'll get away. But as you pointed out earlier, I'm a bit worried about what comes afterwards. There's going to be a lot of manoeuvring because clearly the ice zone it's not as high as it was 4 years ago, but it's still relatively high, and that line represents shortest distance possible to sail, so they'll be skirting along that wherever possible. Interestingly, right now, well, it's a bit early in the piece, we don't see any crazy weather coming at them. I mean, there's good solid depressions there, but nothing outrageous that they need to run from. So that's how I see it. The new windy routing thing is quite handy. I don't know if you tell your viewers to check that out, because that's, if you click on one of the boats in the windy app, you can get the routing for each one and play the arrow across the bottom to see how the routing goes on a GFS. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah,
it's very, very good. I did run a route from Charlie's position this morning, which is here, and I think, this is from his current position, so it does look like that group, and I think certainly the Louis Burtons and the Thomas will stay in this weather train if they can hold on to it, with fairly strong westerly conditions and a couple of systems to push them along over the next week. But what I'm interested in really is what's coming behind them for the group that behind. If I just stop the routing there, you can see this enormous area of high pressure which pushes around the bottom of South Africa, and I think we're going to see some huge distances opening up between the lead group that managed to hang on to these systems and those that are left behind.
Yeah. No, well, I've been following this for a while. I've never seen conditions like that before, but regrettably, I've not seen conditions like in the North Atlantic like that before, and I've not seen a situation with the South Atlantic high behaving like it did. So, statistics are out the window, and really to finish off what I was saying earlier, I think this is going to be an extreme, the fact that Charlie doesn't have a particularly big lead, and he really should have a huge lead if statistically we'd sailed the race that we thought might occur from a weather point of view. And so I think it's going to be fascinating to see who can handle this, and it's not really about pure speed here. It's about who's going the right way and who can handle their boat and who can keep the pressure on and manage themselves and take the right risks and remain lucid in decision making for the next month, because that's going to be the hardest thing. And we saw that already a little bit with the Vendée Arctic, is quite how tired the skippers get purely because of the ridiculous motion on board the boat, how physical they are. It was already tough when you were doing it, Conrad, but trust me, it's not very pleasant on those boats now. And,
yeah, there we were. I mean, as you know, inherited Mike's old boat, and Mike decided to sail around the world with absolutely no outside shelter at all. So I busily put a pedestal and a small little coach cuddy, so I could at least sit outside with a cup of coffee and not be in the wet the whole time. But now it's it's completely different. You're inside these boats or relatively sheltered inside these boats, but they're just bucking broncos, aren't they? I mean, they're being kicked around.
They've been very noisy for a long time, but their motion on board is wholly unpredictable, especially when you're inside because you can't see out, and the foils hitting waves and thing lurching in every direction all of the time. It's not a pleasant experience, but more than anything else, you're just constantly tense the whole time. Every time you move around, if you're not on all fours, you're holding on tight to move about, and almost strapped in many cases, and it's just exhausting. And that is the thing, is who is best equipped to, it's not just about fitness, but it's also about the ergonomics of the inside of the boat as to how to protect yourself and how to allow yourself to relax and recover and sleep properly. Because if you can't do that, you very quickly run out of energy and ability and motivation, and all that happens is the boat starts to go slow.
Yep. I've just quickly brought up the other round the world race that's going on at the moment. We've got a race non-stop, fully crewed in giant multi-hulls, and those boats just crossed, or in fact one boat just crossed the equator today, just a few miles ahead of its virtual competitor. Any thoughts on the next sort of week ahead for these guys? Do you think they're in with a shout of breaking this record?
Oh, look, it's way too early to say. I think they're obviously keeping an eye on it, and it's not just about whether they've got 10 or 20 miles ahead or behind, or 100 miles ahead or behind the current thing. Clearly, the current record holder ADEC had an amazing run to the equator. These guys had an amazing window to start with, and they've got there in about the same time. So they've set themselves up to be able to do as good as them in the South Atlantic if the conditions are there. But when you leave France or Northern Europe to do this thing, you really only have visibility on the first part of the course with any degree of certainty. And clearly, the South Atlantic is an unusual place at the moment. Now, interestingly, they don't have an ice exclusion zone, so they can go further south. So potentially, they're able to skip around the bottom of the South Atlantic high, which the Vendée boats can't do because of the ice zone, which is a forbidden area. Now, that doesn't mean that they will, but I think they'll certainly be looking at how they're going to get around there. And they have routers ashore, which the Vendée Globe boats don't, and so those routers are for sure are all over the ice situation, and we'll be guiding them in that point of view. So I think it's potential that they could do an amazing job. They're incredibly fast boats. I'm very happy to see our boy Sam Goodchild on there, and wish them all the best.
Yeah, certainly do. So, that's been really fascinating, Marcus. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on. In fact, later this week, we're going to talk to another team manager across a different discipline to the Vendée Globe, but I'm interested in the role that you guys play, and I'm sure people watching this will be very fascinated by the things that you're having to juggle, both in the pre-Vendée build phase and preparation, of course, during the race itself. So that's been really good.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, Conrad.
Thanks very much to Marcus. He was fascinating to get his insight. Couple of days' time, we'll be talking to Bruno Dubois, who was a former manager of North Sails in France, and in fact built many sails for Vendée Globe teams, but now manages the Sail GP team. So we'll get a little bit more insight into the sort of team management role and the sorts of things that they're looking out for. Thanks very much again for tuning in, and see you next time. Cheers. Bye-bye.